What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sam the Beard Guy channel. So I'm always getting questions on my videos, and I just recently posted a post a few days ago asking for questions, and I try to answer questions as much as I can in the comment sections, but sometimes they do get missed, and so I want to make a habit of doing these videos every once in a while, just answering questions specifically, so y'all can just, get answers to those questions. So as usual, if you want to like, share, subscribe, post, whatever you want to do with my channel and video, that is super helpful, and I can't emphasize how helpful that actually is. My dog doesn't like that he's locked in here. So first question from Tui Perrin. Sorry if I mispronounced that. How would you suggest to practice dominant diminished chords as well as their extensions, flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13, etc.? I can improvise with ease when it comes to major and minor chords, but with diminished and especially dominant chords, I have to pause and work out how the notes should resolve. Thank you for the great playing and knowledge you share. Wishing you a great 2022. You as well. My 2022 is off to a fantastic start so far. So how would you suggest to practice dominant and diminished chords as well as their extensions? So the easiest way to do that is to practice the scale that goes along with alterations. And so this is a practice that you're going to be doing for a while. So there is no easy answer to it. But there are a few scales that are scales used often in the dominant alteration world. The two big ones are what are called your half whole, and then your other that are called your fully altered scale. I'll link a video below. I've done videos on scales to use, but just high level half whole. So if you're in the key of C, that's C, D flat, E flat, E, F sharp or G flat, and then G, A, B flat, C. So it's just half whole, half whole, half whole, half whole, all the way up the scale. That is a great scale to use when you have certain alterations, like your flat 9, your sharp 9, your sharp 11. It leaves out the 13. It has a natural 13 and a half whole scale, but it's a great scale to use on scale or on chords that have some alteration. And then you have your fully altered scale, which is for fully altered dominant chords, which means you're grabbing your flat 9, your sharp 9, your sharp 11, or flat 5, but really it's going to be it could be notated as both, really depending on the context, and then your flat 13 and then your flat 7, of course. That's going to be a perfect place to use a fully altered scale. And so again, I'll link that below, but practicing those two scales is the best way to get more familiar with those alterations. Another way to get super familiar with those alterations, which is in the same video that I'm going to post, is finding certain chords that fit over other chords, so polychords that hit alterations. So if you have a C7 and you play a D triad over a C7, you're going to be hitting your sharp 11. So there's great triads that you can place over dominant chords. If you wanted a fully altered triad over a C7, you'd play like a G flat triad over your C7 shape, which gives you those alterations in a triad. So learning those triads is another great way to learn just alterations. It takes a long time to learn them. It is not something that you learn overnight, but you can spend years doing this, but it's a great place to start. And then you said, with diminished chords, I have to pause and work out how the notes should resolve. Yeah, I mean, that is the practice in and of itself, is pausing with some of this stuff and just giving yourself time to understand how things resolve, how things kind of move around. In my early improv career, my improv was marked by just playing scales. I didn't create a lot of melodic content inside of these alterations, and so just spending time with these sounds, learning the scales, learning the triads, and then just playing with them and just understanding and just printing them on your brain is the best way to practice. Tiana, big facts. I've just recently started teaching myself piano through YouTube and other sources. Can you give us some insight on how your ability of improvisation came to be? Great question. So the first really thing I started with was a blues progression or a blues song with the blues scale. So if you're in a key of F, playing your blues scale in F. That's what I started with. Spent a ton of time with that. And then once I got outside of the blues scale, then I started using half whole and fully altered scales to improv to kind of give myself material to work with. And then I would just watch people play. I'd listen to teachers and see what they're doing. I would transcribe. Transcription is a really important thing to grow your improv vocabulary. Transcribing is one of the biggest ways that I have grown. And then there's also just an element of just sitting down and just playing and just learning through just taking a shot at something. This is something I do with younger people of like, hey, you have these 3 notes to work with. Just play something. You can't play any of the other 3 notes. Just only play these 3 notes. And we'll just do a pass at certain progressions with just these 3 notes. And so, I mean, it's a lot of stuff. Transcribing, just taking a shot at it, learning some of your scales. But you know, it's a long journey. It's one of those things where you just kind of wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm better at this than I was a year ago. And then you wake up in a year and say, oh, I was better at this than I was that year ago. And you just can continue chipping away and just learning and practicing your scales, practicing your triads, listening, transcribing, and you just kind of absorb some language and vocabulary that just helps you grow as an improver. So yeah, great question. Nick Epic, what is your most favorite music scale to play or your most favorite chord progression and why? Thank you for your work. Most favorite music scale to play, D flat, hands down. I love D flat. I love playing in D flat. Anytime someone puts a song in D flat, they're always like, man, sorry, this is in D flat. And it's like, no, thank you. I hate the key of C. D flat is better. So I love D flat. It fits on the fingers really nicely. E flat and A flat are also cool, but D flat, that's the one. There's loose science on that different scales or different keys sound different than the others. They do in the sense of that they're objectively different notes, but relatively speaking, home base is home base, and a third is still a third away from root. There is some validity to keys sounded different back in the older days because they used temperaments and song or instruments weren't tuned the same way they are now, and so that's why a lot of your classical music will actually say like something in D because the instrument was actually tuned in this key, and just the way that it all worked, it actually sounded in that key different than it did in another key. I'm not an expert on classical music tunings, but just something about like when I play D flat, it just speaks to me. There's no science behind that. It's just, if anything, it's just placebo, but I just love the key of D flat, and that's the way it is. My favorite progression in the pop world right now, it's probably 4/5, 6, 1/3, maybe 4/5, 4/6, 1/3, maybe 2 minor over 4, 3/5, 4/6, 1/3. But that 4/5 6/3 kind of movement right now is a favorite of mine. I find myself kind of playing that a lot in just background settings. So yeah, can you walk through your live setup and how you use the virtual libraries live? Yeah, so I've got it slated to do a video here soon on using how I do my live setup. I use MainStage. I've been using MainStage for 4 or 5 years now. It is my go-to live setup, unless I'm just using onboard sounds like for a really simple piano gig, because let's be honest, like just plugging a instrument cable into your piano and a speaker is a lot easier than setting up a MainStage rig. But for 80%, 90% of what I'm doing, I'm using MainStage, and I love it. If you're talking about how I record my videos, I have 2 computers. I have my Mac, and then I have my gaming computer or my PC, which I use for video editing because it has a nice 2080 graphics card in it. But I usually record all my audio in my piano stuff through my Mac because that's where all my virtual libraries are, and then I record my video, my camera set up to my gaming computer or my PC, and then I record video in there. I use OBS for both, and then I export my video on my Mac over to my PC through Dropbox, download it, just sync them up with some kind of clap that I did at the beginning of the video, and then I have both. I like doing it that way because if I do record, like if I screen share anything, it's easier to do with just two separate things versus if you're doing everything inside of OBS and one OBS, you have to make sure that you record it perfectly and you have to edit and change scenes live, and I just hate doing that, and so this is the way I do it. There's, at some point down the future, there's definitely an easier way to do it, and sometimes I kind of hate the way I do it, but that's just the easiest way for me right now. FT Music TV, when is your solo piano album coming out? We need a date. Well, can't give you a date. Hopefully 2022. I want to get it done. The reality is I'm so busy with all the stuff going on that when I do get an hour or two of free time here and there, sometimes it's hard to get motivated to sit down and just keep doing music. Like, I like to have at least an hour or two a day where I'm not playing music or spending time with the wife or whatever. And so it's definitely a passion that I want to get done, and I would love to have it done this year. The easiest way for me to do it is if people just keep annoying me about it on the channel. It's like, hey, when's your album coming out? Because then eventually I'll be like, crap, I'm just not doing this. But yeah, it's coming at some point, sometime between this year and the next 20. But just know that I definitely want to do it. It's just, life, busy. All right, next question, Janek. Forgive me for not being able to pronounce this. Hopefully that's understandable that I can't pronounce this. Where did you learn how to play? What was your musical education? How do you practice now? So how did I learn to play? I started piano at 5. Played classical for the first 5 years of my life. Honestly, hated classical music, was not the vibe. I hated the fact that every time you played something, it was the exact same. That's just not my personality. And so 10 or 11, I kind of started doing half and half, a little bit of classical, a little bit of jazz. And then when I got to college, I went to University of Texas at Arlington, over in Arlington, Texas. Got a jazz degree. First 2 years of that, they make you do classical lessons. So I was playing classical piano and then taking jazz lessons. Junior year and on, I stopped the classical stuff because they don't make you do that anymore. And then I decided that I love media music, like film and video game and television stuff, so I went to University of Miami on a full ride and got a degree in media production and writing, and so all things media-ish. In addition to that stuff, I played trumpet in middle school and high school, was first chair and did the all-state and all-region stuff for all that. In high school, played a little bit in college, did marching band, and then I just kind of dropped trumpet and focused on piano. I've actually recorded on 2 albums in the past year on trumpet, though, so my trumpet playing is so weirdly enough coming back into the rotation. So how do I practice now? To be honest, practicing now is a rare occurrence. I do practice every once in a while, maybe twice a week, but you do. Some people disagree with me, and everyone's in different places, but at least where I'm at musically and what I'm doing, there's always different ways to get better, but I've kind of got what I'm doing figured out. There are things that pop up in my playing where it's like, hey, I need to get better at this, and so I'll spend some time, but for what I'm doing musically, practicing is not as much of a frequent thing as I'd like it to be. A lot of that is just life gets busy. I will say, there's a lot of learning that happens by just playing and doing gigs, and so most of the growth I've seen in the past 5 years as a player has been through just playing gigs and playing with other people. So not as much, in college it's like 5 to 8 hours a day in the practice room. Now as an adult, it's a lot harder to do, and so practicing is limited. It happens, but it's just not as frequent as it used to be. Jack Ferry, is there any advice you have for a classical pianist looking to start on the journey of learning jazz piano? It can be general stuff. Yeah, first of all, congratulations on wanting to stop playing classical and play jazz. Yeah, so that's a great question, Jack. I think a great place to start is playing 2-5-1s. 2-5-1s are the bedrock of jazz music. Everything is essentially some 2-5-1 in some form or fashion, until you get to the modern stuff, and then that's not a thing anymore. But 2-5-1s are all over the place in jazz. They are the foundation of jazz harmony and jazz scales. So I would start learning your 2-5-1s and all 12 keys, and then once you get that, start learning some of your scales in those jazz keys. They're going to be very similar to major scales that you've learned in classical music, but playing them over like a 2 and over a 5. Those are helpful. And then once you get past that, learning some of your just Google half whole jazz scale and then fully altered jazz scale. Learn those in all 12 keys, and that's actually a great start. And then just going through jazz fake books and just playing jazz songs, learning how to voice chords. Those are great place to start. There's also some great books out there. There's jazz theory books. There's some Dan Hurley books, some Mark Levine jazz theory books that are great that you can check out. But yeah, awesome that you want to learn. Jazz is a great genre to expand your piano chops for sure. Arivald, could you transcribe your Amazing Grace Noir video? I can't transcribe it because it's such a free. A lot of that stuff that I record is just not in time, so I don't know that I could. But what I'm actually looking at doing soon is finding a way to sell my MIDI information for like really cheap, like 99 cents a MIDI file. And so when I upload some of those songs that are super, or people just want the MIDI file to it, I'm able to just sell that MIDI file super cheap for people to download. I've looked at doing a Patreon account maybe. I know a lot of people are doing those these days. So I'm finding the best way to get some of that extra stuff to people in a way that makes sense. I do have to make a living, and so yeah, I want to charge something for some of that extra stuff, but I want to charge a rate that feels fair and is not going to upset people. And I think something in that 99 cents to even like up to $5 for some of that extra stuff is fair. But yeah, stay tuned for that. It's coming at some point. Just working on the best way to do it. Yo, Jimmy, favorite Steely Dan song? Peg for sure. Love Steely Dan. Grew up listening to Steely Dan. I think Peg has got a lot of great energy, and it's got that cool chord progression in some of the transitions that are really cool. So yeah, I actually need to go back and listen to Steely Dan. It's been a hot minute since I've listened to some Steely Dan, but Peg is up there. Reeling in the Years is cool. Yeah, Steely Dan. Steely Dan was one of the first groups that I was exposed to, knowing that they aren't really a band. It's just like two guys just doing everything. I was young when I was listening to them, and I thought that was so cool. It's like, oh, like this is not a band. Like they're all just recording stuff on their own. So Steely Dan, awesome group, really different group, but super cool. Marvelous. I'm so bad with names. How can I learn all keys? I'm very fluent in C, but not others. Also, I hate practicing scales, and I don't know fingering, and I don't even have a piano. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of hard to practice without a piano. There's a lot of great cheap options out there that if you can, swallow using a semi-weighted or light-weighted keyboard, you can drop $100 and get a keyboard. How can I learn all 12 keys? If you know one, you know all of them, kind of. It's just as simple as, taking a scale. In a scale, each note is relatively placed to the next note the same way in all 12 keys. And so if you can take a C scale, it's always whole step, half step, whole step, half step. If you can take that the way that is set up and apply it to another scale, another key, then you've learned that scale. A lot of just learning all 12 keys is just sitting down and making an effort to do them. I hate practicing scales and I don't know the fingerings. Yeah, everyone hates practicing scales. So, but if you want to get better at all, practicing scales is one of the best ways to learn all 12 keys, because just go learn your 12 major scales and you're learning different keys. And so, yeah, I would definitely, even though practicing isn't always fun, it is needed and required if you want to grow. Fingerings, there's this, it's the same fingerings for, well, not for each scale, but there's a universal way to finger each scale. Go look those up. There's a Hannon book of piano exercises that I've talked about before on the channel that's awesome for scales. The fingerings are in there, super cheap. But yeah, first step, go buy a cheap keyboard. I think that's super helpful. Brian Williams, the emotion, this is awesome. Love your play style. Thank you, man. Just curious, how come you switched from the SL88 Studio that you used in older videos to the Korg D1? Yeah, so my MIDI keyboard journey has been quite the roller coaster. I first had an M Audio Hammer 88. I loved that keyboard, but it didn't fit with my desk. I have the output platform desk that has the tray underneath, and I wasn't thinking when I bought the keyboard, but they clearly say that keyboard doesn't fit on their website. So I had to return it for the SL88 Studio. That one fit when you took off the pegs on the bottom, but that keyboard felt like garbage. It surprises me when some people say they like that keyboard. It just felt super spongy. It felt not responsive. It just didn't feel good. It felt I'm comfortable saying, like, with objectivity, it did not feel like a real piano. I know some people love them. And to be fair, there are two different SL88s. There's the Studio and there's the Grand version. But I still know people that are like, yeah, the Studio feels great. And it's like, I can't get there. And so if you use the Studio, awesome. But I just didn't like it. And so I got the Korg D1, and I'm super happy with the Korg D1. Feels good. It's super simple. That's the thing with these MIDI keyboards, is a lot of them, when you get into some of the heavier weight action, they also start throwing all these bells and whistles on them. And it's like, I just want, a keyboard that feels good. I don't want tons of bells and whistles. And so the Korg D1 is a great balance. It also has onboard sounds. If I was in a pinch and needed to just go play somewhere and I just needed crappy piano sounds, I would have it, where some of the other MIDI keyboards out there don't. And so yeah, I'm very happy with the Korg D1. I wish that the M Audio Hammer 88 fit my keyboard. That's the one I always say to get, but I always put the caveat in there, make sure it fits with your setup, because it's got such a gigantic back end. I don't know why it's so big. They'd make it smaller. I'd sell this one and get that one. All right, ALBTII, how does the Noir compare and sound to Keyscape in your opinion? That's a great question. Keyscape has always had a reputation of being a little bit more produced on the front end. Whatever they're doing on the back end, they're producing it a little bit more, and so it's a little bit fuller than most of the virtual libraries out there. A lot of people like that. A lot of people don't. So it's really down to preference. I love the Noir felt. I think it's great. Keyscape doesn't really have a great felt keyboard option. You can kind of create one, but they don't have a preset for it. So if you're looking for a felt, the Noir has a great felt. Their particle engine is kind of gimmicky. I don't really use it. I don't really know a lot of people that do, maybe in a very low-key, subtle way, but their particle engine's kind of like whatever. But they have a felt and then a pure piano, which sound great. My best advice for you is, I've got videos on both. I've got a Noir video, I've got Keyscape videos. Just go watch those a little bit and see which one sounds better. They're both a tier 1, upper tier, fantastic product. I don't think any one of those is better. I have a preference, but neither one of them is better than the other. Noir's cheaper. My biggest complaint with Keyscape is that it gives you too much stuff, and that's why it's so expensive. I wish Keyscape or Spectrasonics would sell a light version of Keyscape that had just the C7 and maybe one Rhodes. They charge as much as they do because there's so much stuff, and so that's always been my biggest complaint with Keyscape, is they're just selling you way too much stuff. And I honestly think they'd make a lot more money if they just sold less. And they sold a bit. I mean, Panotech does it. I think they have a light version and then a full version. And with the full version, you get all the cool little toys, but you still get the bare bones piano. So I wish Keyscape would do that. But yeah, my advice is just going to be listen to some of my videos or other people's videos if you have found better channels. That's the best way to figure out which one you like more. If they would bring out Keyscape as a hardware keyboard, it would be a no-brainer for me. Absolutely. I think, you know, at this day and age, it's really hard to justify using sounds on keyboards, like onboard sounds, if it's easy to use virtual pianos. Sometimes the ease of just using what's on a keyboard is worth it. In a lot of live settings, if you don't have a good sound system or a good sound setup, it doesn't matter what you use. It's just going to sound like piano no matter what. But yeah, if you're in a studio and you have the ability to use virtual plugins, it's almost a no-brainer. I do wish, yeah, they would come out with a Keyscape piano with just Keyscape on it, or they sold, you know, or license it out to some companies, or you could use it as like a chip or something. That would be cool. But yeah, Keyscape would sound really good as an onboard keyboard for sure. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. I'd love to keep doing these kind of videos. So if you have more questions for me, drop them in the comment sections below, and I'll probably pull my next questions from my next video, mainly from here, unless I just don't get a lot of response. But yeah, as always, like, share, subscribe, repost, whatever you can do to help just support me. That would be awesome. Thank y'all.